For a long time, I've felt like a spiritual homeless person. No one religion has ever made me feel like I belong there. We're under tremendous pressure to find the one true path. And Islam and Christianity are very strict in that sense. I'm sure there are certain variations of Christianity that perhaps aren't as strict, but it's been my experience that you're in or you're out, and that's the end of it. And I feel like that sort of certainty is what draws a lot of people to Christianity. However, I have some critiques. What if we're looking at religion all wrong? What if it is the case that being multilingual is similar to being a religious polyglot? What if we increased our religious vocabulary and that gave us the ability to communicate different ideas and have a better connection to divinity itself? So instead of trying to find the right religion or the right denomination, I started to look for the right language to express what I was feeling and what I thought was correct. The word I've been looking for all these years is interfaith. I speak Spanish well, and what it does is it pulls me into empathy that the English-speaking mind tends not to have. And a good example of this would be the current immigration debate. On the one hand, I look at someone who crosses the border and enters into a country illegally. It's sort of cut and dry. There should be a process for that person to get into the country. They should follow that process. That's the end of it. Pero en español, estoy pensando que alguien que quiere entrar y quiere trabajar y no es un criminal, que es el problema, ¿no? Especialmente cuando están saliendo de un país bien difícil. Do you see what I mean? And so I can hold both of those thoughts in my mind at the same time, even though they are contradictory. And what it does is it makes me pause and evaluate the situation in a more deep way. We all get one vote, and it's 100% zero. If you don't vote, that's 50-50. It makes a lot more sense to me to give people the ability to split their vote. 70% here, 30% there. We just sum up the total at the end, and you still have the winner. But this notion that you need to be 100% sure and you're not allowed to think that the other side might have some credence or there's something there and you're not 100%, but you're 70%, 80%. Similar to being a religious polyglot, you're able to take multiple competing ideas and as a free thinker, come up with what makes the most sense for you. I was raised Catholic, so that's my foundation. And if you look at the shorts that we're creating on this channel, you'll find that there are a lot of Jesus stories. In particular, the story of the blind man who receives clay on his eyes and can then see is profoundly beautiful to me. And in the same breath, I can look at how Krishna spoke to Arjuna and showed him the many faces of Godhead as also incredibly beautiful and inspiring. In middle school, my parents one day decided that we were Lutheran. And as a young man, I found that very difficult to swallow because I thought that religion was something that was inherent to who you are. It wasn't necessarily a choice. And here I was thrown into a different culture, and I would write things like 2 + 2 = 5 on the chalkboard. I'm sure I was very annoying to my teachers, but I was constantly bringing up Bible passages that made no sense to me, that were, even by today's standards, kind of crazy. And their answer, because they weren't bilingual in that sense, was, oh, just don't look at that. We don't focus on that. We don't talk about that. And I think that's true for a lot of people who identify with just one way of thinking. When I got to college, it is possible that I had a crush on a girl who liked the more modern Christian churches. And so I found myself going to them and feeling like they were really trying to get me involved and be a part of it. I just didn't feel right. there. I always felt like an outsider. I felt like I was trying to fit in when really I didn't feel like I was. When I got to grad school, there was a classmate of mine named Gopika who was into the Hare Krishna movement. I started hanging out at this house that literally didn't have a TV in it, which for me was a bit absurd. And so it was a church house, but a house where they lived. And everyone was helping clean. And there was a puja table with some deities on it that I didn't really understand. And their form of entertainment was chanting. I don't know about you. I don't know how you grew up, but chanting wasn't necessarily my childhood entertainment. So it was very, very different. The food was vegetarian, and I had never had food anywhere near that good. It's not veganism. It's different. Lacto-vegetarianism, which means vegetarianism with dairy. An incredible start to something that would become part of my entire life. And on top of that was this mantra that we kept chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, or singing it, Hare Krishna. I'm sure you've heard it. It'd be easy to find if you want to go check it out. The notion behind this was you sing it on repeat for hours, and you can contemplate God while you're doing it. That's the idea. Later in life, when I looked at the rosary, I saw, oh, I see. So Catholicism has this. I just never did it, where you just repeat, and it does something. It allows the body to sort of be preoccupied, and then the mind can pray in this spectacular way that I didn't understand was even an option. And for those who know me and those who don't, let me tell you, I dive all in on things. And so I was reciting this mantra all the time for a very long time with prayer beads because I wanted to see if it worked. And to a degree, it certainly does. There's a lot to be said about mantras. And shout out to all the Hare Krishna friends of mine for showing me that. It was at this time that I started to explore ahimsa, or nonviolence, and it's who I am. It's what I believe. To this very day, when I look at Christianity, I just am sad that there is no voice that I've heard. Maybe you have. Leave it in the comments if you have. That is crying out for the animals of the world. Christianity and animal rights, to me, just there's no connection there that I've ever experienced. Please tell me if I'm wrong or if you've experienced something else. But all the Catholics and the Lutherans, every denomination that I've ever talked to, I've heard of one that's vegetarian, but they just don't touch it. And that's just something that doesn't work for me. And so when I look at Christianity and the sacrifice of Jesus and the entire narrative, it's so beautiful and I love so many things about it. And yet the way they treat animals to me just doesn't add up. And then when I look at Hinduism, there's this moment where Krishna basically convinces Arjuna that he has to fight. And for years I've wrestled with that. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna essentially tells Arjuna, this is your duty to fight. And I think about Nazi Germany. I think about wars against nations that are being incredibly violent and aggressive. And I get it. I'm not a pacifist. If someone came into my house and was trying to hurt my children, I would hurt them to stop them from doing that. That being said, I struggle. I think we should struggle to hurt someone. There should be a really good reason to do that. And ironically, it's the combination of Hare Krishna Hinduism with Christianity that I believe has brought me to this level of ahimsa or nonviolence that I am really happy with when I'm choosing to eat and the suffering of those beings that, other people are choosing to eat. Over time, I started adding Buddhism into the mix. The Four Noble Truths is something that I find many Westerners don't have a clue about. They don't know what they are. They don't know anything about them. And especially the fourth noble truth, which is the Eightfold Path, essentially doing right things in your life, having a right career, having the right focus, having the right mindfulness, right concentration. But the notion of the first noble truth that there just is suffering has been very helpful when I'm suffering. And I'm sure right now, hey, guess what? You're suffering. How do I know? Because there is suffering. When we exist on the earth, the effects of gravity, the way our minds work, you're suffering right now. How can we possibly alleviate some of that suffering? Well, you don't have to suffer twice. You can suffer by knowing that we are on a mission, so to speak, a spiritual mission. And to suffer because you're suffering, like, I shouldn't be suffering, and you want to not suffer. That's my takeaway of the noble truths. Suck it up, buttercup. You're in pain, but guess what? So is everyone else. Everyone else is also suffering. We all suffer. And on its face, that seems really sad and hard to deal with. It's just true. It's just true. There is suffering, and wanting it to be different adds to the suffering. So based on what I'm dealing with, now I have 3 different traditions to attack the problem. If I'm trying to find forgiveness, Jesus Christ. If I'm looking for healing, Jesus Christ. If I need to sacrifice something in my life for the greater good, Jesus Christ. When I look at my lunch, dinner, breakfast, that's all Hinduism. It's all Hare Krishna, ahimsa, do no violence, sort of monk, holy, simple foods that turn out every year that passes. More and more studies come out that, hey, wait, you know those incredibly small veins in your brain, you know, your arteries in your heart? It turns out that eating meat is not good for that. You really want to open up the chi, if you will. You don't want the veins to be constricted by cholesterol and plaque. It's very bad for you. The fact that that's connected to this ancient tradition of vegetarianism is delightful. And if I were eating meat every day, I wouldn't feel that way. And again, my Christians, where are you at on the animal front? Do you see what I mean? It's just not there. And to have a very Christian moment, I forgive you. Now, there are probably going to be people, if this video is seen by anyone, that are saying, oh, you're just cherry picking. The point of any faith tradition is to go all in, actually believe it, not flip-flop. And to that I say, I throw with my left arm and my right arm. When I'm eating food, I'll eat with my right hand, and then I'll use my left hand. When I'm brushing my teeth, left hand, right hand. One is my dominant hand, and the other isn't. But it doesn't matter. I use both of them. I was criticizing someone I know the other day. His hand hurts. He was buying a new mouse, and he was like, oh, yeah, my wrist was really hurting, so I was hovering over it. I bought this new mouse, and now I can lay it down. And I said to him, just buy a mouse like this and just switch to the other side and just use your other hand. And, oh, that's too slow. I could never do that. Excuse. The truth is we live in a culture that desperately wants to win and be fast. And that's ego to me. For example, in basketball, up until, and you can find the exact date on this, but I don't believe it was the case that they were doing left-handed layups. Left-handed layups are a relatively new phenomenon, let's say. And now, if you don't do a left-handed layup, you're not really that great at basketball. If they know you're going to the right, that's silly. And so using your left and right hand is something that, as a species, we're getting a little bit better at it. Baseball pitchers, for example, will just throw with their right hand until their elbow and shoulder blows out. And they just never use their left hand. This is bad for a number of reasons. It breaks down the right arm. It forces the right arm to do things that it's clearly saying stop. It hurts, injuries, etc. And if we rethought that balance, we would have a much healthier society, and that's what I am pushing for. And so when it comes to religion, the same thing. If you just keep throwing with one hand, you're gonna find the piece of that religion where it's not so pretty, and it's problematic, and it doesn't cover everything. And so I believe it is healthiest to find balance, even if the other religion or spiritual practice or thing you're looking at or exploring isn't your dominant hand. You're a child again. You're learning to throw, and often it is the case that I'll hang out with someone and they'll throw with their right hand, and then they'll do this like shoulder move like this, like, oh man. And I'm like, throw it with your other hand. And they just, the thought of it alone, they're like, no, I couldn't possibly, blah, blah, blah. And I think to myself, you choose to suffer. You continue to choose to suffer. And I don't understand, except I do, because you don't want to look like you throw like a girl. It's ego. So with enough cajoling and convincing, I get them to throw, and the first couple of times doesn't look great. But then they very quickly get much, much, much better. And they're like, wow, like it feels good, and it's balance. So do you want to be balanced or not? I believe you don't have to choose a team. You can choose a practice. People are going to criticize me for cherry picking, you're just taking this and this and that. The truth is every religion does that. John 3:16, these famous Bible verses, people are going to promote the best of the best of the best, and they're going to kind of shoo away the things that aren't so fun. And if you allow yourself the ability to become a religious polyglot, becoming fluent in another language, it takes years. It takes years to understand another religion. Years and years and years and years. And so it is a noble pursuit. And I would love to hear your journey in the comments. And if anyone else is a religious polyglot, I'd love to hear about your stories. That would be cool. So come join us over here at God is Love by liking and subscribing and talking to us. And I've genuinely appreciated communicating with you here today. I love you. I care about you. I want you to be happy. And that's where all this is coming from. So hopefully you can find balance in your life, and I'll see you in the next video.